let's take a step back and then 2 steps forward. Hey everybody, this is Spooky's Revenge. We're back with another episode of the 5-year $500 Rags to Riches series episodes. I did it. Yes. And today I want to talk about some fundamental concepts. So let me go ahead and get my face out of the way. So right here you'll see a spreadsheet. I'll get into that in a second, but I just want to talk about what we're doing as far as the covered calls and cash secured puts. So at its very base level, when someone buys a contract, like let's say they buy a call, for example, that call it represents a promise. Okay, so a call specifically represents the right but not the obligation, which is the words everybody says, but few people actually conceptualize when they hear it. To buy 100 shares per contract at the agreed upon strike price on or before the expiration date. So what that means is if I buy a $10 call with an expiration for next Friday, that means that I have the right as the buyer of the contract to decide whether or not I want to buy that person that sold me the contract shares at $10 a piece. And in order for that right to pass to me, I have to pay the seller of that contract. So basically, if we think about it like, selling a house, right? And you want to put people on a list, all right? They have to pay to be on that list, right? And then whether or not they buy the house is irrelevant until it's time to deal with that. But just to get on that list, they got to pay you, right? So as the seller, you're collecting premium, you're collecting money up front in exchange for just the right to be on that list. And then separating that from the assignment and exercise portion of it, we get into the actual resolution of the contract. So the contract itself will dissolve completely if one of 3 things happens. The first is it expires, right? We all kind of know that if you buy a call and you just don't do anything with it and it doesn't go up, it expires worthless and you just waste your money as a buyer. The seller keeps all that premium and they keep their shares, okay? So either way, the contract dissolves and then nobody has it, okay? The second is if you exercise the contract. So if you buy a call, price goes up maybe to $12 and you assign it, you buy the shares at $10, you've assigned the seller to sell their shares to you, right? Because remember, you're exercising the right to buy them at $10 a piece on or before the expiration, sorry. So you buy 100 shares per contract at $10 a piece, okay? And the contract disappears, okay? And then the third item here is if the seller of the contract buys the contract back. Now, they're not going to buy it back from you specifically unless you sell it, but they buy it from a pool of similar contracts with the same strikes and expirations. And that's where we see the volume and open interest on the option chain data, okay? So either way, once that contract is resolved, once it dissolves, it no longer exists, okay? So now if we flip back over to the sell side, if we're the seller of that contract, every time we open a contract, every time we write a call or a put, that gets assigned, it gets attached to 100 shares per contract. So if I were to sell that $10 contract, those 100 shares that it represents would kind of be attached to it, right? They'd be branded as, hey, these are promised, they're spoken for, I can't do anything with them until this contract goes away. So essentially what I'm doing as a seller of contracts is I'm selling a promise, okay? I'm just selling a promise to buyers to buy or sell someone shares, depending on if it's a call or a put, at a strike price before or on an expiration date. So all we're doing is just selling promises. And in order to back up that promise, we need to have the shares, and that's where cover options come in. So if we're selling a call, we need 100 shares. That is a covered call, okay? If we want to buy 100 shares, we need the cash. So the cash gets set aside. In that case, it's a cash secured put. And then if we get assigned on that, we have to buy the shares at the strike price, okay? So that's all we're doing. And in order to write those contracts and sell them, you need either the collateral, which is shares or cash, or you could do margin, but I don't mess with that stuff. But you get paid in exchange for writing those contracts, okay? And that's the promise. It has value, okay? So really what you're doing is you're trading the value of that promise itself. So if you sell that promise for $14 and you buy it back for $10 or $6, your profit is the difference between what you sold the promise for and what you paid to get it back or make it disappear. So if you think about it like if you're a clerk in a store, right? If you're a company, really good analogy is you're basically just selling a biodegradable basket to every customer that walks in the door. Now you've got 100 shares or 100 items behind the counter, and if they want them, they have to bring that basket up and say, hey, I want to buy these shares, and then they'll do that. Or the basket will just degrade and dissolve before they leave the store, and then they just leave. That's the equivalent of it expiring worthless. Or, if they come up and buy the shares, then you just sell them the shares and just the shares because they already have the basket, so you don't get to count that twice. That's fraud. Don't do that. But they just buy the shares and then they leave the store. Either way, that basket goes away. All right. And the third option there is you just buy it back. So you say, hey, I don't want you in my store anymore. I don't want to sell these to you. Give me that basket back. I'll pay you what it's worth right now, which is ideally less than what you bought it for when you came in. And then I just take that basket and I smash it behind the counter, right? Because it's my own basket. I can do what I want with it. So there tends to be a little bit of confusion as to the position itself, right? So if you have 100 shares, you're plus 100 shares, okay? If you sell a call, you're negative 1 call because you're selling it, okay? So when you buy that call back, you just brought back up to 0. You don't have an extra call in your portfolio. You just have 100 shares, negative 1 call. When that call dissolves somehow, whether it's one of the 3 ways, that disappears, and you still have your shares unless the way it was resolved was through assignment. Okay. Otherwise, you keep your shares and you keep the premium, and the contract just goes away. Okay. So, cash secured puts. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing, but you're agreeing to buy shares. So you're selling the right to sell shares. Okay. So if I buy a put and I want to exercise it, I then have the right to sell my shares to somebody at the agreed upon strike price. Okay. So if I sell a put, I'm selling the right to sell, which means somebody else has to buy my stuff if they want to exercise it. So that's kind of a fancy limit buy order. And that's the price comes down, hits a level, it gets assigned, whatever. The transaction takes place. I buy the shares, and then the price ideally goes back up, right? A covered call is the exact opposite. We want the price to think of it like a fancy sell order, right? If the price goes up, 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 we sell, right? And then the contract disappears, the shares disappear, we keep the cash. But for a cash secured put, it's the opposite. We're looking to unload shares. So we're going to sell put. And then ideally it gets assigned at some point, right? Because we want to have the shares so we can roll the covered calls. And that just means that we buy the shares. Okay, so that's important to understand the difference between the two. For covered calls, you need to have at least 100 shares. For cash secured puts, you need to have at least enough cash to buy 100 shares. Okay, so they're the same thing. They just have different terms attached to them. And that's it. So every buyer has a seller, every seller has a buyer. It's very closed logic, right? So with that in mind, I want to talk about this spreadsheet here, okay? And you can see I've got 5 tabs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got one for Neo, one for OCGN, one for Plug, one for SPCE, and one for Walgreens, okay? So in this spreadsheet, they'll all have the same format. I just kind of want to recap this really quick. I've got the exchange and ticker up top, and that's used to calculate the current price. It just fetches it from Google Finance. That's just a built-in Google Sheets function. And I just want the price. It's delayed by like 15 minutes. I don't really care. I'm not day trading these. Then I've got a date column here, and that's just to help me keep track of stuff, because if I don't log it, I will forget. I'm just bad like that. Then I have a drop down here. It just says buy, sell, assignment, or expiration. So these are the 4 actions that we can take with these contracts. So if we're buying, that means we're either buying a contract or we're buying shares, okay? If we sell, that means we're selling a contract or selling shares, okay? Your average price per share only changes when you buy shares. Selling shares does not affect your average, okay? And then we have assignment and expiration. So if I get assigned, let's say that Neo, for whatever reason, shoots up to $12. I get assigned. I have to sell those shares. This will affect the quantity of shares, the quantity of the contracts, and the credits. The P&L, right? Because I'm selling shares at that point. It also means that my contract value that I sold immediately gets closed. It gets dissolved at a $0 price point. So it's the same thing as if I bought it back at $0. Okay, so if I sold it for $12, it's down to maybe $5 or $6. Somebody decides to assign it or to exercise their side of it, the buyer. I get assigned, it immediately goes down to $0. I keep the full premium and I sell my shares at the difference between my cost basis and the strike, but I can't count that twice. Remember, we don't want to count the basket twice. So when you're looking for your profits, you're just going to take your cost basis and subtract that. I'm sorry, you take the strike and then you subtract your cost basis, okay? You don't want to do that and then also include the credits that you received for selling contracts. And that's where people get messed up because they count their profits twice. Okay, so I'll dig into that here in a second. So expiration, same thing. The contract value just goes to 0. It dissolves at the end of the day on the expiration, okay? And then for type, I only have 3 items here. I've got shares, so I'm either buying or selling shares, buying or selling covered calls to open or close it, or buying or selling cash secured puts to open or close it. So these are sell to open, buy to close. This shares is buy to open, sell to close because I'm not short selling, okay? Then I've got a list here for descriptions just so I can keep track of the strikes and expirations, the quantity, and the price at which each of these actions was taken. And then this here automatically calculates whether or not it was an option credit, an option debit, and how it affects my cost basis. Okay, so this is important to keep track of, and you can do this manually. Like, you don't have to build a spreadsheet for yourself. Just kind of walk through it reasonably, just kind of to yourself and say, okay, on March 4th, if I bought 8,426 shares at $5.35 a share, that's my average. Okay, my average is $5.35. Then if I sold a call, 84 calls, I'm sorry, and collected 55 in premium, okay, that's a credit. So I add that to my credit column. And that reduces my cost basis from $5.35 down 55 cents to $4.80. Okay, I still have 8,426 shares, and at this point I have negative 84 calls, right? Because I'm selling 84 calls against the 8,400 shares that they're attached to. All right. Then on March 11th, I sold 26 shares. Okay, at $6.12 a share. Not a big deal. I just wanted round numbers. So that was a share P&L. So I put that in this column. And it was a surplus, a net profit of $159.12. Okay. And then on the 19th, I bought the contracts here that I sold for 55 cents. I bought them back at 21 cents in premium. So the difference there is 34 cents, but I don't want to count it twice. So I just put it in the debits column since I'm paying $84 contracts times 21 in premium. Since it's on all my contracts, I'm just applying it once here. So I put that in the debit column, right? So I collected 55 in premium as a credit when I sold them. I had to pay 21 in premium back when I buy them to close them, right? Remember, the goal here is to cancel out that contract and make it 0, okay? That way I keep the shares. Then I immediately sold another set of calls at a premium of 30. So that goes in a credits column because I'm collecting money in order to sell the calls, okay? And then on the 28th, I bought them back and closed them at 9 cents premium, right? So I collected 30, paid 9, they're closed. Okay, so right here, when I collected the 30, I sold 84 calls. So I had negative 84 in quantity. When I bought them back, I bought 84, so it brought that negative 84 right back up to 0. So I have no contracts. I still have all my shares, but I have no contracts, okay? And then same day, right after I close this one, I open another one for a different strike price because remember, at this point, my cost basis is down below $5, so I can reduce the strike price and still be in profitable territory. So I reduced the strike price to get a bigger premium. So I sold this one for $26 or 26 cents in premium, which that brought my cost basis down to $4.54. So if I were to, just for the sake of illustration here, right? If I were to buy this back, samesies, right? 84 times. If I bought this back at 5 cents right now, I would put that in the debit column because I'm paying $5 to get it back. And that would increase my cost basis from $4.54 back up to $4.59 because I don't get to count those 5 cents as a reduction because I had to pay that to get them back. Okay? So overall, the total number of credits that I've received from selling these contracts is $1.11, obviously times 84 and then times 100. It's a lot. And then for option debits, I did the same thing. I just added them up. So this is my net adjustment to my cost basis, or to my average, I'm sorry. So if I take my average and I subtract the sum of all these credits and then I add the sum of all the debits, I'll get my cost basis. All right. So at this point, Let me just erase this one because that's not an actual transaction. And I don't want to muddy up the data here. All right, so right now, my cost basis is $4.54 because I collected these in credits and I paid these to get those contracts closed early, right? I could have just let them expire worthless, but I wanted to close them early. So the difference here between 55 cents and 21 cents is 34 cents. The difference here is 21 cents and then another 26 cents. That adds up to a net average of 81 cents. I think I did that right. Either way. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't mess up my spreadsheet. Either way, my cost basis right now is $4.54, and the current price is $4.47. So I might be looking at the share price in Webull in the trading software and see a big red number and say, oh my God, I'm 16, 17% down. Realistically, I'm 7 cents down per share. Okay. So it's not the end of the world. We just don't see that reflected in the share in the position in the trading software itself, right? And that's why it's important to log these things, because this is thousands and thousands of dollars that I've collected. And if I don't include that and I look at my position and I'm down, I'm gonna be like, oh man, this is really going bad, right? But realistically, I'm only 7 cents down per share at the end of the day. So easy peasy. So OCGN here is a profitable position right now. My cost basis is down to it's below 144, just around 144. The current price is 152, right? And that's, well, this one's already closed, so we can't really count this one. But just to walk you through it, it was kind of a unique scenario. So I bought 10,000 shares, 92.29, and then I sold the call against them and I collected 20 cents. That reduced my cost basis from 92.29 down to 72.29, okay? Then I sold the shares, all right? I sold the shares and I bought this call back at the same time, right, to close this entire position out because it was above the capped profit. So I collected on the shares, I collected $16,110. And on the contracts, I lost $5,100. So I made quite a bit of profit on that one just for closing out the cover option position. So you see there's a realized loss here on the contract side, right? I only collected $20, but I paid $71.45. Now that's obviously times 100 and then times 100 again because there was 100 contracts. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's look at Plug really quick. So Plug is another one that's in profitable territory right now. My cost basis is down to $2.97, and I'm just chipping away at it. You can see these aren't huge. But the current price is around $3.17, so I'm profitable if I were to sell this completely right now, just based on what I've collected so far, and then reducing that number by how much I've paid to close those out. So on March 20th, I bought 300 shares at $3.28, right? 300 shares, $3.28. Then I immediately sold 3 covered calls and collected 5 in premium against all 3 of those contracts. So it reduces, so I put that in the credit column, right? That brings my cost basis from $3.28 down to $3.23. Okay. And then on the 22nd, I bought those back for 1, right? So I got paid 5 and I bought them back at 1 to close them. So it's a profit of 4. So my cost basis went from $3.28 all together, all down to $3.24, right? So 4 cents difference there in the cost basis. Then I immediately sold 3 more at 12. Okay. And then it gets a little complicated because I bought 2,500 shares on top of that at $3.40. Now that affects my average. It brought my average from $3.28. Remember, your average doesn't change unless you buy more shares. Selling shares doesn't affect it unless you sell them all and then your average is 0. But buying shares changes your average. Trading options and collecting credits and debits affects your cost basis, okay? And when your average moves, your cost basis moves. So it's important to understand that as well. I'll try to make this a little bit more concise because I don't want this video going too long. All right. So I bought 2,500 shares at $3.40. I averaged up on the shares. So it brought my average from $3.28 up to $3.39. And I went from 300 shares up to 2,800 shares. Okay. So that affects my cost basis. I went from $3.12, right? Because I collected these credits and then I paid this 1 premium to get my cost basis from $3.28 down to $3.12, right? So 16 cents. And then I averaged up by buying more shares and that brought my cost basis up to $3.23. So it's important to keep track of everything you do, not just the contracts, okay? Especially if you're buying and selling shares. And then on March 25th, I sold 25 calls at 13 premium, against those 2,500 shares, right? So at this point, I had 28 contracts total, 2,800 shares, and I collected a total of 25 cents in credit, in premium, right, as a credit. And then I paid on all 28 contracts, I paid $4 to get them closed. So that brought my cost basis from 323 down to 314 overall. Because remember, I paid, I collected this and then I paid that. So it kind of offsets by 9 cents. Okay, so 323 down to 314. Then I immediately sold 28 contracts again at 12, right? So I received a credit, okay? And then I paid on April 2nd, I paid $3 per contract to get those closed. Remember, I'm selling the promise to sell someone my shares at $12 premium, and then I don't want to sell them. So I'm going to buy that promise back and it's going to disappear. It's going to commit Sudoku and just vanish. All right. It doesn't exist anymore. I've canceled it out. So I paid $3 to do that. So I collected 12, paid 3. That brings, that's a total of $9 or 9 cents in cost basis. So it brought it down from 314 down to 305 for the duration of that contract. And then I immediately sold, and I immediately sold 28 more contracts at 8 cents per contract in premium. So I've collected 8 cents. So if I were to buy these back at 4 cents, for example, that would increase my cost basis up 4 cents, right? So my real cost basis right now is 305. That's what I've locked in, okay? But I've collected $8 in premium for selling these contracts. So if I don't get the full $8 out of those, so if I buy them back at like 1 cent, I'll only get 7 cents worth. That'll adjust this cost basis again. So right now my cost basis is at 297, assuming I don't buy this contract back. If I buy this contract back, that's going to go back up by the amount that I pay. All right. But until then, my cost basis is 297 and the current price is 318, which means I'm in a profitable position. SPCE, same story. This is just 100 shares. So this will be very fast, very easy. So I bought 100 shares at $1.41 per share on March 20th. Then I immediately sold a covered call for $6. And then I paid $3 to close that out. So I sold the promise to sell someone my shares. I got paid $6 for doing that, and then I didn't want to sell them. So I went to that person and I said, hey, I don't want to sell you my shares. What's it going to take to get you off my back about it? I paid $3, and I get that promise disappears, right? I kind of paid myself to get out of a contract. That's all you're doing. That brought my cost basis overall from 141 down to 138. And then I was on a call with a member. We were walking through covered calls, so I just kind of opened one and closed one really quick, $4, $5. So that affects my cost basis a little bit. I was just showing them how it works for the fills. And then we both kind of settled on just selling them for $4. So far, I have a $4 credit, and I haven't paid to close that contract out. I have a $1 fill, so if I get paid, this will go up to 136, but for right now, it's 135. Current price is 131, therefore, this is not a profitable position right now. So if I close this completely, I'll take a 4 cent loss times 100, so $4, okay? WBA, last position here. And again, I only have 100 shares in this one. You can see my cost basis is currently $19.82. The current price is $18.60. This one sold off like crazy, which is kind of what we want when we sell these covered calls. So on March 13th, I sold 100 shares, or I'm sorry, I bought 100 shares at $21.26 per share. Okay. Then I sold a covered call against them and I collected $92, right? So that goes in the credit column. And then I paid $18 to get that promise resolved. I closed that contract by buying it back. All right. So my cost basis went down 92 cents and then back up 18 cents. So it went from 21.26 down to 20.52 altogether. Okay. Then I sold another call at $44. So I collected $44. Then I paid $6 to make that go away. Right. So I collect the difference between those two numbers is my profit as far as credits are concerned. And that is what reduces my cost basis. So now my cost basis is $20.14. And then I immediately sold a covered call at an 11-cent premium, right? So that reduces it down to 20.03. And then I kind of wanted to buy more shares potentially, so I decided to sell a cash secured put. And that just, I don't need the shares for that. I just had the cash set aside. So $2,000 set aside. And then if I get a sign on it, which I probably will if it doesn't pull back up over $20, that will go towards buying another 100 shares, at which point I'll update the quantity and my average. Okay. So in this case, I'm kind of averaging down a little bit. So I collected $21 in exchange for selling that put. So whether or not I'm assigned, I keep that $21. Now, if I don't want to buy those shares, I can buy those puts back, or I can buy the put back at maybe $11 or something. But if the price is going down, the put value is going to increase, so I'd have to potentially take a loss on that piece of it. But if I buy the contract back, it'll go in the debits column since I'm paying. Okay, I don't want to. I kind of want the shares, so I think I'm just going to let that ride. So basically what it did is it just a cash secured put all by itself, just not talking about anything else right now. I sold a $20 put, and I got paid 21 cents per share to do that. So I've automatically bought these at $19.79 instead of $20 just from selling the call. Or sorry, selling the put, right? And that's kind of the advantage of doing these is you just get those discounts kind of baked in, which is pretty good. But overall, I've received $1.44 total in credits versus debits. So overall cost basis reduction here is $1.44 per share. So instead of having my shares and just holding them from $21.26 down to $18.64, mine are now worth $19.82, even though it's still underwater. I've reduced it by $1.44. And that's insane because it's only been a couple of weeks and I haven't done anything. So it's a pretty powerful strategy. I'm trusting the process. You know, some of these are pretty far down as far as the shares go, but again, we're offset pretty nicely here. So like this one, 7 cents down. That's my biggest position. It's like 90% of the portfolio. I don't care. It's easy. OCGN, profitable. I can close this right now and just walk away with a net profit if I wanted to. I might still realize a loss on the shares, but I can use that for taxes. But overall, I'm net profitable on that one. Okay. Plug, same thing, profitable. SPCE, I'm underwater by 5 cents. So again, not the end of the world. I got 100 shares, no big deal. Walgreens, I got 100 shares, potentially picking up another 100 if I get assigned this Friday. And I'm underwater on it by about $1.20. So not the end of the world, but it's, you know, it's a $20 stock. So $1.20 is pretty negligible as far as drawdown. All right. So with that said, this episode has gone about 27 minutes. So I don't want it to be too much longer, but I really wanted to walk through the concept of shares versus contracts in your portfolio. So again, a contract just represents a promise. You're saying you're agreeing to either buy or sell shares at a strike price on or before a certain date. Okay. That promise disappears if it expires. So time goes by, nobody follows up on it. Or if you pay the buyer to make the promise go away, so you buy yourself out of that promise essentially, which resets you back to zero obligations. Or if they cash in and they say, hey, I want to do this. I want to exercise this. I want to do my shares. Okay. And then once you're assigned, you're just buying or selling shares at that point based on what you've already agreed to. Okay. So I'm going to end this episode here. I appreciate you all watching. And I know this was a longer one, but I just wanted to really focus in on what these represent. All right. So I'll see you next time. Thank you all for watching and be safe.